It is 7 o'clock. Good to see you. And we begin this morning with breaking news on the cost of living. The UK's latest inflation figures are due to be published, well, right now. They'll be telling us how much more we have to pay for everything from the cost of driving home for Christmas, the food for the table, or even those gifts for your loved ones. It is Wednesday, the 14th of December.
I'm at Birmingham wholesale market where traders will be absorbing the latest inflation figure. We just have inflation running at 10.7%.
Seeking justice for war crimes, Sky News discovers how the UK is training Ukrainian judges to prosecute Russian soldiers.
They are prosecuting war crimes in real time. This is a live and very brutal conflict.
The government's emergency committee meets this morning with rail unions and postal workers on strike. Nurses, well, they're due to walk out tomorrow. A major incident is declared on Shetland, where snow has brought down power lines and thousands of homes are expected to be cut off for days. Former England cricket captain Freddie Flintoff is airlifted to hospital after a crash on the set of Top Gear. Morning all, and we begin with that breaking news on the economy. The latest inflation figures for November have just been published. You might want to look away now. Inflation currently running at 10.7%. Let's bring in our business correspondent, Paul Kelso, joining us from Birmingham's wholesale market. Paul, good morning to you. Eye-watering, to put it mildly.
It is an eye-watering figure, almost as eye-watering as the temperatures here this morning. The traders here earning their money this week in these temperatures. But amazingly, that figure, 10.7%, up near 40-year highs, is actually a little glimmer of good news. It's off the peak we saw, what may be the peak of inflation in the last monthly figures of 11.1%. Certainly everybody here and around the country will be hoping this does signify we've hit the top of the inflationary curve. 10.7%, of course, still a huge amount to bear on the cost of living. But traders here saying already they are starting to see a little bit of an impact in a small reduction in prices. They put that down to fuel prices easing slightly, and that could be passing on through to customers. This place serves the restaurants and shops of Birmingham and the West Midlands, so the produce bought here, the price paid in this market, feeds right the way through the local economy into the prices people are paying in the shops. Of course, this number will be watched very keenly also in Westminster. This incredibly high inflation, the backdrop fueling the industrial action we've seen over the last few months, intensifying over this Christmas period. Yesterday, we heard that wages were rising at only 4% in real terms, way below the real cost of inflation. At 10.7%, that number isn't going to change dramatically, and is simply perhaps going to entrench the views of those on the receiving end of these rising costs, the workers who are demonstrating and taking industrial action for higher pay against a government that seems at the moment more intent on offsetting the impact of strikes than working to end them. But here, traders just sensing a little bit of good news in these prices, rising still very high, but not as high as last month.
Paul, as you say, those industrial disputes ongoing, negotiations such as they are, not yet completed. With inflation running, a hair away from 11%, does it strengthen or weaken the government's case that to give, huge swathes of the public sector significant pay rises above the 3-4% that some are talking about right now, that would be inflationary in and of itself? Does this weaken or strengthen their case?
I'm yet to check what the reaction is from the Chancellor of the Exchequer. We will get one very promptly this morning, but I imagine that will be precisely his argument. With inflation running so high, to add high pay, what they would see as high pay settlements in the public sector, would further fuel that inflation, would fuel what is known as a wage price spiral. That is, as prices rise, wages rise to keep up. That entrenches high prices. There is a strong argument, though, that's made on the public sector side of this There's no cost to the economy of paying public sector workers more. They will spend that money in the economy, but there are no goods and services that are getting more expensive because you're paying nurses more or paying teachers more. In fact, you may be feeding some of that money back into the tax system in due course. And remember, wages are not as high as inflation. A classic wage price spiral is when wages are at or exceeding inflation. At the moment, they are well behind that rate of inflation. I'm sure the counter-argument from the unions will be that people simply need enough pay to keep up with prices. And of course, certainly in the public sector, we're seeing the compound impact of a decade of austerity, real wages way below where they were. They haven't kept up with inflation. But that argument is at the heart of these industrial disputes, and I suspect we will see in the coming days those positions entrenching rather than being eased by the fact that inflation may, just may, have reached its peak.
I suspect you might have a point. Much more from you throughout the morning, Paul, for now. Thanks very much indeed. But we do indeed have immediate reaction to those figures from Labour. Rachel Reeves, Labour's Shadow Chancellor, has said this. The question people across Britain will be asking themselves this morning is, do I and my family feel better off under the Tories? The answer will be no. Labour's Rachel Reeves continues. Today's numbers show just how weak our economy continues to be, but we do not have to continue on this path of managed decline. We will be speaking to Labour's Emily Thornberry in the next hour. But let's turn our attention to Ukraine. And the centre of Kyiv has been hit by airstrikes during the night. It is currently unclear whether anyone has been killed or indeed injured, but the city's mayor says that the emergency services are on the scene. Eventually, Ukraine will be seeking justice for the victims of Russian aggression. Sky News has learned that the UK is providing training for 90 Ukrainian judges to help them prosecute war crimes. Our political correspondent Tamara Cohen has this exclusive report.
The horrors of the Ukraine war are still raging, and maybe for months or years to come. But bringing the perpetrators of war crimes to justice doesn't need to wait. The government's top lawyer told me about the intensive training the UK is giving to 90 Ukrainian judges at a secret location in the region to help them convict Russian soldiers.
They are prosecuting war crimes in real time. This is a live and very brutal conflict. I hope that those Russian soldiers and officers who are watching the Ukrainian prosecutions at the moment will realise that they must act in accordance with international law.
Most war crimes will be tried in Ukraine, but its president is also pushing for an international tribunal modelled on the Nuremberg trials.
The aim is to have prosecutions at all levels, isn't it? The rank-and-file soldiers, but also the Russian top generals and maybe one day Vladimir Putin.
The international community will want to have a moment where justice is done and seen to be done. We don't yet know exactly what form that will take. I don't think when I was a government lawyer that we ever anticipated that we would have war crimes in Europe in the way that we did again in the Second World War, and that we would have to start talking about Nuremberg-style trials.
Sky News teams have witnessed the sort of atrocities for which it is hoped Russian leaders will eventually be held accountable. Like these killings in Makariv on the outskirts of Kyiv, where officials say over 130 bodies were found.
They've never tried war crimes before, and it's a specialised business.
Sir Howard Morrison, a former judge at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, spoke to us after his first session with the Ukrainian judges.
I've spent 25 years staring either literally or metaphorically into mass graves, and believe you me, it's a very different exercise than a single body or a single victim.
So far, Ukrainian authorities have convicted 14 Russian soldiers. The number of cases recorded is more than 43,000. The ball is rolling, but it will take time, money and political will to reach the bigger targets.
And Tamara joins us in the studio. Good to see you this morning. I wonder how this will play into the request from Volodymyr Zelensky and his wife. In fact, when she was here in this country, that there will at some point be some kind of Nuremberg-style set of trials, because as things stand, it is just the Ukrainians that are prosecuting these crimes currently.
That's right, and most of them will be done in Ukraine through Ukrainian courts, which is why they're getting this help to make sure they reach the right international standards, because they have not done this at scale before under the condition of hostility still going on, because previous war crimes trials have been done in general afterwards. This idea of a special tribunal, yes, it is really gathering pace now. There is going to be an international criminal court investigation. It's going on already, and all countries are backing that. But the Ukrainians say that the crime of aggression, as in the actual invasion and blaming Russian leaders, needs to be done separately. And just in the last couple of weeks, the French government are now supporting that. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is supporting it too. Victoria Prentice said it's on the table. We're not ruling it out, and she wants to keep discussing the idea, but it felt like the British government is now inching towards it as well. Obviously, will take some time to set up, but the idea that Russian leaders, of course, if you can get hold of them, might eventually be put on trial, that kind of special tribunal does seem to be gathering more support.
It does indeed. Tamara, thank you very much indeed. But let's just take you back to the breaking news on inflation. Those figures published in the last few minutes showing that prices have risen, I should say, by 10.7% in November. We have been hearing from the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. Here's what he has to say. The aftershocks of COVID-19 and Putin's weaponisation of gas mean that high inflation is plaguing economies across Europe. The Chancellor continues that he knows families and businesses are struggling here in the UK. Getting inflation down, says Mr Hunt, so people's wages go further, is my top priority, which is why we are holding down energy bills this winter through our energy price guarantee scheme and implementing a plan to help halve inflation next year. Mr Hunt continues in this statement. I know it is tough for many right now, but it is vital that we take tough decisions needed to tackle inflation, the #1 enemy that makes everyone poorer. Mr Hunt concludes, if we make the wrong choices now, high prices will persist and prolong the pain for millions. Let's turn our attention to Shetland, where a major incident has been declared after thousands of homes were left without power following heavy snow, which brought down power lines. Let's speak to our Scotland correspondent, Conor Gillis, who joins us now. Conor, Shetland at the best of times. You know, it's a pretty extreme and exposed place, but without power at this time of year, it's going to be grim.
Grim indeed. That is the situation facing so many people in the Northern Isles. As you said, they are vulnerable to the extreme weather at the best of times. But even engineers on Shetland are saying they have seen nothing like this in the last 20 years. That puts it in context just how bad a situation locals there are facing. As you said, the problems relate back to that snow and ice falling on those overhead power cables. They have been weighing those down and then eventually snapping them and causing all sorts of problems. Shetland has a population, the islands of Shetland have a population of around 22,000. And to put it again in further context, this morning SSEN, the Distribution Energy Network, have told me that 2,800 properties remain without power at this stage. Also, this is a part of the world with no access to mains gas supply that many people on the mainland across the whole of the UK enjoy. So that adds to that further reliance on the electricity network. Now, community hubs have been set up across the islands to try and help people with gas stoves and making food, and that community effort of people rallying together has been coming together in recent days. But of course, the efforts to try and help people have been hampered by this extreme weather, because it's not just the mainland of Shetland. This is an island with various islands off its coast as well. Now, the rescue effort has been increasingly difficult because the island's airport has been closed, which has meant that engineers have had to get that long ferry journey up there to try and assist with those efforts. I'm told this morning that 15 crews will be arriving on that first ferry. The airport has now reopened, and SSEN Distribution Networks is looking to try and fly helicopters to and from Shetland to speed up the process. But locals are being told that it is likely to be Thursday at the earliest that they will be reconnected. Some may be waiting into the weekend. We're also hearing as well that a woman's body has been found in an outbuilding in the very north of the mainland of Shetland. The Coast Guard rescue helicopter was part of that major effort in the last 24 hours. Police Scotland not ruling out at this stage that weather may have played a part in that lady's death. We're waiting for that confirmation from Police Scotland. In the meantime, a major incident has been declared by the Scottish Government and the local council on the islands, who are asking people to remain indoors at this critical time.
I mean, Conor, what is the weather forecast for the next few days there?
So the weather forecast is looking like an improving picture. The issue has been to try and get people, to get those engineers to the island. It can be a very difficult task because that airport has not been open. So yes, the weather conditions have been improving, but it is a slow journey to try and reconnect those islands because people are so spread out across that part of the world.
Conor, many thanks indeed. Well, let's stick with the severe weather. Sky's Saba Chowdhury joining us now. Saba, just bring us a little bit up to date. I mean, it's been pretty grim, it's been pretty extreme. You look wrapped up. You look all right, to be perfectly honest with you. I was expecting to see woolly bonnet and scarf on.
Good morning. Well, I've come well prepared. I'm well layered, Neil, this morning. It's -1 degrees here in central London. In Birmingham and Aberdeenshire, it was -17.3 degrees Celsius, so it could be worse. But I'm here in central London, and I'm joined by Petra Salva, who is from St Mungo's. They're a homeless charity, and the reason we're here with them today is to really get a picture of what it's like for people who have to live rough on the streets this time of year. Now, Petra, thank you for joining us on Sky News. Being homeless is difficult any time of the year, but at this particular juncture, it can cost lives. Now, tell me a little bit about what St Mungo's are doing to help those living rough.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, sleeping rough is dangerous every night of the year, but as temperatures plummet, it becomes more life-threatening. So St Mungo's, they're a leading homelessness charity. We work across 365 days of the year, but when it gets really cold, our teams are out 24/7 trying to get people out of the cold and out of the danger and into places of safety. So our teams are working now. They're working right now. They've helped hundreds of people off the streets already across London, across the southeast. We're really concerned about people's welfare all the time, but right now it is life-threatening.
And tell me specifically about some of the outreach work that you guys are doing today.
Yeah, so the teams go out in pairs. They're literally looking for people who are bedded down. I just walked here today. We're in central London. I was concerned. I saw people under blankets. So my teams, they're resilient lots. They literally go up to people. They offer them help. And when they're really concerned, sometimes we find that people are in desperate need of medical assistance because they didn't realise themselves how cold it was. So this is really life-threatening stuff. I mean, I've not seen cold temperatures like this for a long time and for such a prolonged period of time. So our teams are literally saving lives.
Petra, thank you so much. So a difficult time indeed, especially for those currently in the cold, but good work being done by the likes of St Mungo's to help those that need it.
Yeah, fantastic work. Saba, many thanks indeed. But let's give you some of the day's other headlines now. And the former England cricket star, Andrew Freddie Flintoff, has been taken to hospital following an accident during the filming of an episode of Top Gear. The BBC says the presenter was injured on a test track in Surrey. In a statement, they said this: Freddie was injured in an accident at the Top Gear test track this morning, with crew medics attending the scene immediately. He has been taken to hospital for further treatment, and we will confirm more details in due course. A school in South Devon has been forced to close due to an outbreak of Strep A. Kingsbridge Community Primary School shut on Tuesday with 40% of pupils and 23% of staff off sick. The Prince and Princess of Wales have released a new family photograph for their annual Christmas card. It shows the royal couple alongside their 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, walking together earlier this year in Norfolk. Yeah, that wasn't a recent photo. It's time now for a quick look at the morning's papers, and as you'd expect, that picture is on lots of the front pages. You can see it there at the top of the front page of the Mail. Its main headline, however, quoting the Prime Minister, saying he will fix the appalling asylum farce. The Metro reports on the Prime Minister's pledge to clear the asylum backlog within a year. And the Telegraph also leading with the promises by Mr Sunak, saying he'll stop those who, quotes, got here by cheating. The Express chooses to lead on the strikes. The paper has a plea. Can we have our country back, please? And the Times has the UK's chief nurses telling the heads of the nurses' union that key services could be in jeopardy if they walk out tomorrow. The Mirror's headline, nurses say, we are doing this for you. Now, China has announced it will stop reporting new asymptomatic COVID infections, the latest step in the country's move away from their zero COVID policy. Our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith joins us now live from Beijing. Helen, explain exactly the rationale behind all of this. I understand why, given the protest that we saw, that people were wishing the government to move away from the zero COVID policy, but how does this play into that?
Well, it sounds very technical, doesn't it, Neil? But it's actually extremely significant, because what it really means is that the major wave of COVID infections spreading across this country will not be properly tracked, and people will never really know just how bad it is. Just to quickly explain, China have, throughout the pandemic, been separating asymptomatic from symptomatic cases, and the definition of which falls into which category has often been a little unclear. But broadly, asymptomatic cases have made up the very vast majority of daily infections. So taking those out of the accounting essentially mean the official numbers will absolutely plummet, and no one will have any real idea exactly how serious this outbreak actually is. And I cannot emphasise enough just how major the outbreak of COVID does seem to be, particularly in the city of Beijing. Just anecdotally, you know, everybody we know has it. It really is an incredible outbreak of this disease that's currently sort of underway in the city. So why? Well, the authorities say it's because people aren't participating in the tests anymore. And as you can see, this testing booth behind me, I mean, the queues used to be huge at this testing booth. There is just a tiny trickle of people. So there is a degree to which that is true. But there's also a sense that a lot of this testing system has slightly collapsed. Just for example, I've had multiple tests at booths like this in the last week. I've only had one result back. So a sense that the testing system isn't working. But accusations, too, that the government might be trying to obscure what's happening. There is a massive wave here following a sudden and dramatic U-turn. Just take COVID deaths, for example. There have been about 1 million infections in this country since the 1st of November. Only 6 deaths reported. So really a sense that it's not clear exactly what's going on. But the Chinese people will start noticing if the hospitals, if the morgues, if the crematoriums become overrun in the weeks to come.
Helena, many thanks. Still to come on the programme this morning, well, as we've discovered, the UK is helping to train Ukrainian judges to prosecute Russian war crimes. I will be speaking to one Ukrainian MP about the fight for justice. That's coming up in just a second. With a major incident declared in Shetland after thousands of homes were left without power, I'll be speaking to the island's police chief inspector. And at 8:05, the Shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornberry, will be here to discuss the latest inflation figures, the strikes taking place, and indeed that Ukrainian scheme. To which we turn our attention now. Sky News has learned that the UK is providing training for 90 Ukrainian judges to prosecute war crimes. But putting criminals on trial while a war is still raging will prove to be difficult. Tomorrow, of course, her story, so she's going to join me for this one. But also joining us now from Kyiv is the Ukrainian MP, Andrei Osadchuk. Andrei, lovely to see you this morning. I understand, though, first and foremost, that you're in Kyiv this morning. I'm just wondering how things have been there. Reports of, again, significant drone strike by the Russians. Do you know much? How has it been for you?
Good morning. Thank you very much indeed having me here. Yes, today morning there were another Russian-Iranian kamikaze drone attack. At 6:30, it was pretty much loud, even here in the downtown. For the moment, the officials report that 13 kamikaze drones has been shot down in Kiev sky today morning. Just, I think, 10, 15 minutes ago, the air raid sirens were switched off. So this attack is over. No much damage, as my understanding for the moment. Some administrative buildings were hit just, I think, 3-5 kilometers from me. So Kiev is fighting.
Good. Very pleased to hear that. And of course, the air raid sirens have been switched off. So, Andre, let us talk about this scheme, the UK government providing money and assistance to train up Ukrainian judges to deal with what we understand to be a plethora of war crimes allegations. What is the significance of this for you? Because quite clearly, the Ukrainians wish to prosecute as many of these war crimes as is possible whilst the conflict is ongoing.
Look, few very important things. From the very beginning of this big war, since March, myself and many other Ukrainian politicians were promoting one very simple and clear narrative. A big part of Ukrainian victory is not just defeating Russians on Ukrainian soil, but bringing into accountability everyone who committed war crimes in Ukraine. Because without justice based on international law, it's important to expect peaceful and comfortable future. For this very moment, it's not my wish. It's a joint, consolidated view of G7. Just 2 days ago, G7 spread its latest communiqué, and let me quote, there can be no impunity for war crimes and other atrocities. We will hold President Putin and those responsible to account in accordance with international law. So it's not my wish anymore. It's not the wish of President Zelensky or all other Ukrainians. That's the consolidated understanding of the West. But the challenge is not only to bring Russian leadership to accountability, but to bring into accountability everyone who committed war crimes. And at the moment, I can report to you that Ukrainian officials registered more than 70,000 crimes related to Russian aggression. More than 50,000 war crimes has been detected by Ukrainian law enforcement. All that require absolutely huge efforts from prosecutors, from experts, from investigators, and definitely it's a huge task for Ukrainian judiciary system and for Ukrainian judges, because it's understood for today that yes, top Russian leaders will be brought into prosecution through International Tribunal Court. I hope so. I recently came back from Hague, and International Criminal Court in Hague is working extremely hard to have a good result with this. But all these thousands of war crimes definitely will be considered by Ukrainian courts. We already are doing this. So said that, the training of Ukrainian judges is extremely important because no one in this world has enough capabilities and enough experience to proceed with such a huge amount of war crimes. Finishing, I will repeat the same. Without justice, there will be no peaceful future for all of us. But to reach that, we need to defeat Russians first, too.
Indeed. Andre, I just want to hand over to Tamara Cohen, our political correspondent, who's been speaking to the British Attorney General, who's organising this scheme. Tamara.
Hi, Andre. Your judges have prosecuted, I think, about 14 war criminals so far, Russian low-level soldiers and commanders. How quickly do you expect it to accelerate? It's obviously a huge task.
Yes, you are absolutely right. There were already several final court decisions of identified Russians who committed killing and rape in Ukraine, especially all these cases, I think, from Kiev region. Look, if we are talking about thousands of war crimes, it's understood that it will take years. But we shall not be afraid of amount of time which we will have to spend. I am, as a lawyer, I understand that it takes a lot of resources and a lot of time. But if in 3, 5, 10 years we will complete this job, it will be very good. There is no any other options for all of us.
Andrea, I'm afraid we have to leave it there, but we hope the scheme works successfully. Andrea Sadchik, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for your input as well, Tamara. But we're going to go back to the cold weather, and I'm afraid to say that Arctic blast, which has dropped the temperatures, it is set to continue across the UK over the coming days. Sky's meteorologist Joe Wheeler joins us now in our regular weather people in their back gardens segment. Joe, just tell us, how much longer are we going to have to put up with this? How much longer are we going to be sending you out the back to freeze for 3 minutes every hour?
I tell you something, it is absolutely perishing this morning. It really is. We've picked up a bit of a breeze, which, of course, is making the cold weather feel even colder. And that's going to be the case across the country. So not so much mist and fog around. Still warnings out for the far north, eastern parts, the southwest parts of Northern Ireland for ice this morning. Snow showers still coming into parts of Scotland, down the east coast. And we've got some sleetiness for Devon and Cornwall. But elsewhere, as I say, the mist and fog should clear. Lots of sunshine, but so cold as that wind picks up, and the wind's strongest in the far northeast, the far southwest. Now, we are going to see a change, but not a very quick one. So temperatures last night weren't actually as cold as they were the previous night. We've still seen about -12, but add the wind to that, and it's just absolutely horrendous. So the cold weather is going to stay with us, further snow showers to come, further ice, obviously, until we get to the weekend. And then we start to see some wet and windy weather working its way up from the southwest. And of course, once we pick up that southerly wind, things will change. And by the time we get to Sunday, we're looking at daytime temperatures in double figures. Can you believe it?
I can't, but thank you. Appropriately enough, time for us to take a very quick break. Coming up next here on Breakfast, we will be hearing from the Institute for Fiscal Studies as the rate of inflation eases slightly, a small glimmer of hope for the UK economy. That's next. Welcome back. And let's head back to those newly released inflation figures showing prices rising by 10.7% last month. Let's speak to Max Warner, research economist at the Institute for Fiscal Studies, here to talk about something else, which we will do in just a second, Max. But I wonder your immediate reaction to those figures. I'd say it's probably not the time to break out the bunting, but you know, a small glimmer of hope for the economy.
Good morning. Yeah, as you say, 10.7% over the last 12 months. That compares to 11.1% over the preceding 12 months. And so, yeah, I think that is a glimmer of hope. I guess the hope is that inflation is going to now start coming down, but this is only really 1 month. And so, yeah, we don't want to overinterpret it too much. But the hope is that it's going to reduce the pressure on households, but also, crucially, public services like the NHS.
Which is where we are to be focusing the rest of our discussion, Max, of course. Just tell us a little bit about your research, because a lot of it is pretty counterintuitive, and it stems from the fact that we are spending more on the health service than ever before, and yet treating fewer patients. You're going to have to explain this one to me.
Yes. So as you say, we're spending more on the NHS than we were pre-pandemic. The NHS also actually has more staff than pre-pandemic, yet across lots of different types of care, the NHS is treating fewer patients than it was. And really, we view this as a kind of continued impact of COVID, creating a number of different pressures, all of which are making it harder for the NHS to treat patients.
What is the role, perhaps, of social care in all of this? Whenever I speak to friends, colleagues who are working in the front line of the health service, one of the biggest problems that they always point to is, and you hate to use the word bed blocker because it's not their fault, but ultimately, practically, that is what it is. If you cannot get people out of hospital, then you can't get people in.
Absolutely. I think this is one of the things that's been raised. And just from personal experience, I've had a grandparent who's been stuck in hospital for about 7 weeks, unable to be discharged. There is some evidence that this is going on and that it's harder to discharge patients than it was last year. So I think that's part of the story, but it's only one part. There are lots of other things, for example, fewer beds available for non-COVID patients that are also mattering too.
So does this mean we almost are forced back to the drawing board to put the blueprints of the health services as initially conceived and have to start tinkering? Because the situation is not going to be resolved necessarily by just more money, is it?
I think that's true. I think we're worried that there is a risk that the impact of COVID isn't just going to be for the next year or two, but it's going to have a kind of persistent and long-running effect on how much care or how many patients the NHS can treat with the same level of resources. And I agree, I think that raises important fiscal questions about how and what we want the NHS to do.
Well, look, Max, I don't know if it's your gran or your grandpa, but we wish them very well and a speedy recovery. Thanks very much for your time this morning. Now, the Government's Emergency Committee is meeting again this morning to discuss the wave of industrial action across the country. Rail workers and postal workers, they're both out today. Nurses, of course, set to go on strike in England, Wales, Northern Ireland tomorrow for the first time ever. Let's bring in our political correspondent, Mari Aurora, who joins us now from outside the Cabinet Office, where COBRA, that rather butch macho acronym that they use to describe the Emergency Committee, will be taking place a little later. I mean, ultimately, what more can they do?
Well, that's the question, Neil, isn't it? So the government are massively keen to portray an image to the public that they've got a grip on these strikes, that they are doing everything they possibly can to mitigate as much of the disruption as possible. Although we know that the government, Oliver Dowden said just this week, it's not going to be possible to completely mitigate all of the disruption we're expecting to see, especially because there are cross-sector strikes. So it's nurses' strike tomorrow, another day 2 of train strikes today. We've got postal strikes, we've got border force strikes. So realistically, there's going to be massive disruption. So in this just building right behind me, that is where that COBRA meeting, that emergency committee, as you were saying, Neil, is going to be taking place today, where it's going to be chaired by Oliver Dowden, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and some of the kind of top government officials to try and show and find a plan of how to deal with these strikes, especially considering we're going to have so many strikes all over the country and at Christmas time as well. Businesses are already being affected in the Christmas season. A lot of negative press for the government. Now, the government have been accused of not really getting around the table sufficiently or really, with any realistic offer for the unions. The unions have been heavily critical of the government. So the question is, as you say, what can the government do to show that they are having a grip on this situation, and will the public believe them?
Mari, many thanks. Let's stick with the World Cup, and defending champions France, who of course knocked out England in the quarters, look to avoid an upset against Morocco this evening. Let's get a little bit more on this from Sky Sports news correspondent Tim Thornton, who's in Doha for us this morning. Good to see you, Tim. Look, France are looking fantastic, of course, but I wonder if you have any words of counsel for a breakfast news presenter not a million miles away from you right now, who might have a tenner on Morocco to win the whole thing.
Yeah, good morning. Well, Morocco have been fantastic in this tournament. They've been the surprise package, and they've had to do it the hard way to get through to the semi-finals. They played against Belgium, they've played against Croatia, they've played against Portugal and against Spain, and they've only conceded 1 goal, and that was an own goal. So their record defensively has been outstanding. They're the team that everybody out here now has adopted as their second team. They've got huge support out here. They've got a goalkeeper who's been fantastic in Bono. He's been one of the standout performers in this tournament. So there are lots of positives. They'll have a huge fan base here as well. There are 30 planes arriving here today. The Moroccan FA have given out 500 extra tickets. So they'll certainly outnumber France inside the stadium this evening, and who knows, it will be an amazing story if they can do it, but to do so they've got to get past France. And Kylian Mbappe, joint top scorer in this tournament, he's on track to win the Golden Ball along with Lionel Messi. So yeah, it's going to be difficult for them tonight, but they've surprised us all throughout this tournament, and who knows, they might just be able to do it again to set up a World Cup final against Argentina, which would really be something, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. Tim, many thanks. Enjoy the football. On today's Sky News Daily podcast, Sally Lockwood, filling in for me, is joined by Dr. Nasser Mohammed, himself gay and Qatari, but who now lives in the United States. He says that LGBT plus Qataris feel removed from the conversation about Qatar's hosting of the Football World Cup. You can listen and subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts, or just scan that code on your screen. Now, something for you to check out, this little guy's dribbling skills. The International Committee of the Red Cross shared this video of Tu Sang Ong after receiving a new prosthetic leg at a rehabilitation centre in Myanmar. And he's got some skills, although he's going to get done for travelling there. I tell you, he will be shooting hoops in no time. Well done, that wee man. Now, with a major incident declared in Shetland after thousands of homes were left without power, I'll be speaking to the island's police chief inspector. That's next. Welcome back. As we've been reporting, a major incident has been declared for Shetland after thousands of homes were left without power following heavy snow, which brought down power lines. Pleased to say we're joined now on the programme by the Police Chief Inspector for the Shetland Isles, Stuart Clemenson. Stuart, great to have you on, and I suspect that you are a very, very busy man right now, so we will try not to take up too much of your time. But just bring us up to date with the very latest. I mean, to what extent has power been restored on the island?
Good morning, Kate. Yeah, thanks very much for your time. Yeah, it's been a challenging 48 hours here on the island. Power has been a challenge for obvious reasons. We had initially 3,800 customers off supply, mainly in the north end of the island. Through the work that SEC, the local electricity board, have been doing, we've managed to bring that down to 1,800. But it's still a real challenge for the residents who are actually still here and still living in that area.
Stuart, are you managing to get the kind of the technical staff that you need to get the power back onto Shetland itself?
Yeah, from the electricity SEC's point of view, they've had a phenomenal response. They've got 45 engineers heading up to the island who arrived this morning off the boat, along with 17 vehicles. That will complement the teams that they've already got here, taking them up to 60 engineers. Their reports from our meetings we were having yesterday with them that it's been catastrophic, to use a better word, and they've never seen in 30 years devastation of overhead power lines. And it's been a really finely balanced set of environmental kind of conditions that have seen that the ice and the snow start to form on the top of the electricity pylons, and then those pylons then actually taking the weight and actually been pulling down to the ground. But it's really worth kind of highlighting the work ongoing in the background. The impact of the snow has been definitely unprecedented. Our local resilience partnerships have stepped up and been working really tirelessly over the last 24, 48 hours, right through the night, to make sure that ultimately we're caring for the people and our vulnerable people in the community.
I mean, Stuart, I've been Shetland a couple of times myself, and it can be wild at the best of times. Just describe to us what the weather was like when it was at its peak.
Yeah, I think first of all, it's good to say that actually the community of Shetland are a hearty bunch, they're a hardly bunch. They're really good at kind of living through it all. We've certainly got a yellow wind warning later on today for between 50 and 60 miles an hour. That's under normal circumstances a quite kind of standard practice up here, but impacted with already the power outages and the snow that's been on the ground. It's been snowing here all night long. We're expecting further snow, road closures and drifting this morning.
So tell me just a little bit, Stuart, about the calls that you and your colleagues will be receiving right now, because as I understand it, you'll still be able to use the 999 ability on your mobile phone, even if the landlines are down. So what are people looking for? What assistance are people requiring?
It's 2 seconds. It's the 99 system. Some of the phone lines have had challenges over the last kind of 24, 48 hours. British Telecom are working really hard to restore them, and some of the final outages that we have are linked to the power outages. So once the power comes back on, that will come back up. But yeah, the urge is to people to ultimately stay at home, stay safe, look after their friends, their families, their colleagues, anybody that possibly can round about them all. Excuse me. Not the best when the phone's going here in the background. Apologies.
If you need to take that, Stuart, please do.
No, it's okay. It's a challenging 48 hours, looking for people to stay at home, look after their friends, look after their families, and just really have that good neighbour, that community feeling that they actually have across the island, and it's very, very strong here.
Are you local to Shetland yourselves, or have you ended up there with work? I'm just wondering, just so you can maybe just tell us a little bit about the islands in better times, because I have to say it is one of those places that people always say, oh, I'm going to try and visit, but they don't, and they really should. Maybe not right now.
Yeah, I think it's... no, absolutely. I've been in Shetland now for a year. I'm predominantly from the west of Scotland and spent most of my time down there.
I detected the accent, yeah.
Yeah, the Glasgow accent comes through slightly. But no, it's an absolutely stunning place to live and to work. The community have been so open, so welcoming to me when I've come here as well. Under normal circumstances, actually the weather, despite probably popular belief, we don't tend to get cold temperatures, we don't tend to get high temperatures. We tend to kind of air around about that average, and a good summer's day here is 16, 17 degrees. But likewise in the winter, the temperatures don't drop to maybe some of the temperatures we're seeing in Braemar, etc. at the moment, down to minus 17 last night. We very rarely get anything lower than kind of -1, -2 here in Shetland.
And just a word from you as well, Stuart, about your colleagues within Police Scotland, but also the other emergency services who will be working round the clock, I suspect, in Shetland. I mean, they must be putting in the graft, they must be putting in the hours right now.
Yeah, listen, a big thank you to all the emergency partners who have come round the table over the last 48 hours. The Coast Guard have been phenomenal. They were deploying yesterday. We had a couple of ongoing incidents and they deployed 17 staff along with the 4x4 vehicles to help us. Ambulance, fire brigade, all the emergency services have really come together. The council as well, over 30 gritters out on the road this morning, yesterday as well, just clearing those vehicles that have become trapped in the snow, looking out for the vulnerable people who may be stranded in the vehicles, etc. Our teams have been out in their 4x4s over the course of yesterday, last night and right through today, again, responding to any calls where we need. It's looking out now for those vulnerable people to make sure that people have got the medical supplies that they need, the oxygen, the insulin, etc. And so us working in partnership with the Health Board here in Ireland, we're helping to be out there and deliver those needs and goods that we have.
I will look, wishing you and all your colleagues on Shetland all the best over the next few days as you continue to work hard. Chief Inspector Stuart Clemenson, thanks very much indeed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Quick look at the weather.
Anticipation is rising, and so is the atmosphere. Are you ready? The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
And it's looking to stay cold into the weekend with a raw wind in the northeast and southwest, bringing some sleet and snow with it. There'll be an extensive sharp frost at first light today with some dense freezing fog patches over central parts, wintry showers near many northeastern coasts, just a little rain, sleet and snow clearing from the southwest. Most places will have a dry and sunny morning, but the fog will linger in places.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, have you ever wondered what it sounds like all the way up there on Mars? Take a listen. Sounds like the messages I leave my parents on their answer phone when I accidentally bum dial them. But NASA has actually just released this sound. It was captured by the Perseverance rover last year. Now, that crackling, that hissing that you can hear, well, that is believed to be dust grains hitting the rover from a whirlwind. Now, these so-called dust devil sounds are strikingly similar to whirlwinds here on Earth, but it is slightly quieter due to Mars' thin atmosphere. Much more coming up in the next hour. I'll be speaking to the Shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornberry, about those inflation figures.